Welcome to Anews. I'm Amir Taslim, and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. Tensions between Iran and Israel have erupted into open warfare. What began as a targeted Israeli campaign against Iran's nuclear infrastructure has escalated into a full-scale conflict, with Iran firing hundreds of missiles and drones in retaliation. Civilians are suffering, casualties are rising, and global powers are scrambling to contain the fallout. What does this war mean for the Middle East, for Türkiye, and for the global balance of power? On today's episode of Turkey's Diplomacy, we'll analyze the military, humanitarian, and diplomatic dimensions of this growing crisis.
President Donald Trump on Wednesday declined to say whether the United States would join Israel's bombing campaign in Iran as that conflict stretched into its seventh day.
I may do it, I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
Later on, at an event in the Oval Office, Trump was again asked if he had decided whether or not to join the war.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war, things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other. But with that being said, I would say right now, Israel, from the standpoint of winning a war, is doing pretty well.
Trump added that Iranian officials want to come to Washington for talks, but that he wasn't sure whether the meeting would happen.
So they want to see me in the White House. That's a big statement, but it's very late.
Is it enough?
Israel said its Air Force on Wednesday had destroyed Iran's police headquarters in the capital, Tehran. Israel's military also said waves of strikes in and around Tehran and in western Iran in the past 24 hours have hit sites producing raw materials, components, and manufacturing systems for missiles. In its last update days ago, Iran reported that Israeli strikes had killed 224 people, mostly civilians. Meanwhile, Israeli authorities say Iran has fired around 400 missiles at Israel since Friday. They say 40 of them have pierced air defenses, killing 24 civilians. Sirens sounded early Thursday morning in Tel Aviv once again, as missiles cut across the skies over Israel and Jerusalem. Trump has veered from proposing a swift diplomatic end to the war to suggesting the United States might join it. In social media posts on Tuesday, he mused about killing Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and demanded Iran's unconditional surrender. A source familiar with internal discussions said Trump and his team were considering options that included joining Israel in strikes against Iranian nuclear installations. The Wall Street Journal said Trump had told senior aides he approved attack plans on Iran, but was holding off on giving the final order to see if Tehran would abandon its nuclear program.
Welcome back to the program. Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik, welcome to the program.
Hi, Omar.
Dr. Mehmet, we've seen in the last 2 to 3 hours, Iran has been attacking Israel. They've targeted a hospital, and then there's the exchange service, which was also targeted, the exchange building. The stock exchange building was targeted. For now, 224 people have been killed. There are multiple people killed in Israel as well, but that toll is extremely low as compared to what we've seen in Iran. Dr. Mehmet, how are you looking at Israel's response right now? What do you think Israel can do? It has asked the Iranian people, the Iranian government, to evacuate multiple areas, multiple villages. The United States has also made some comments. President Trump has spoken as well. Firstly, how are you looking at the Israeli response? How can Israel attack, or will it attack Iran?
Well, first of all, we can say that I think Israel or Israelis woke up to a very harsh morning as Iran retaliated Israeli attacks on Iranian territory, especially the Iraq heavy water reactor was targeted by Israel, and then Iran retaliated this morning, towards the morning or early Thursday today. They attacked a hospital, and I mean one of the missiles, I guess, landed on a hospital and the stock exchange as well. So, but you mentioned about the heavy death toll on the Iranian side, and Israel not having such casualties. That is particularly due to the Iranian airspace not having as strong defense systems such as what Israel has, the Iron Dome. So when that is reactivated or activated, all the residents, they go down to shelters and the sirens go off. So they are more prepared, actually, perhaps one of the most prepared states around the world for their residents. So their preparedness minimizes the death toll when there is an airstrike or one of these rocket or attacks or a missile attack against its territory. So ahead of the Iron Dome being activated, the sirens go off. Whether they intercept or not, that's one thing. But nevertheless, everybody, they are able to go to shelters. I mean, the country has an underground shelter system, basically, where all the residents can flee and go down to secure themselves. But Iran or other countries that Israel have attacked, they do not have these systems. So casualties, of course, are much higher on the Iranian side. Now, Iran, this is perhaps the strongest retaliation, one of the strongest retaliations from Iran. How Israel will respond to this, I think there's two aspects of this. One is whether they will make this a very targeted one against the leadership or some key figures or some significant infrastructure that they can actually target, and that will be a very high damage on the Iranian side. Nevertheless, I think how they will retaliate will also be based on the psychological effect on the Israeli side, because, I mean, you know, it's one thing that they intercept and they keep getting these retaliations from the Iranian side, but the fact that they actually hit a hospital and a stock exchange psychologically brings tense moments for the Israelis, I think. So, I mean, Iran is a very large country. Israel is more dense. Israel is smaller. Israel has less people in it. So that the psychological effect of those targets or that retaliation from Iran has a bigger impact on Israel's possibility of retaliating even harder or responding harder to the Iranian attack. So we will see what happens. But in addition to these two impacts, these two effects, I think Trump's encouragement of Israel will also, in a way, be a determining factor on how much of how big the retaliation will be.
Mehmet, Trump has said that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And, you know, yesterday he said that Iran was a few weeks away from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Let's look at the statements made by other European leaders as well, because I want to, you know, discuss this response as well with you, the American response and the European response. Now, Macron has, you know, emphasized on diplomacy, has cautioned against regime change in Iran. And then, you know, when you take a look at what the German chancellor has said, he has said Israel is doing the dirty work for us in Iran. So also after the end of the G7 summit, we saw 2 days ago that they released a statement saying that, you know, Israel has the right to defend itself. Doesn't Iran have the right to defend itself as well? And Mehmet, one more thing. I asked you about the response from the Israeli side. Do you think that Israel's response also depends on how the Americans are looking at the situation?
Well, there is a few, you know, tiers to the question. So to begin with, there is of course, a variance between how the European leaders are reacting in general, with the exception of very rigid remarks coming from Germany or very blunt remarks coming from Germany. Nevertheless, I think the European side is a little bit more cautious about how far they want Israel to escalate this tension. On the U.S. side, U.S. is directly involved in this conflict. U.S. is a side in this conflict, even though they are not physically. They haven't said they have. You know, they're not carrying out airstrike by U.S. Air Force. Still, Israel and there is a very, I mean, that strong relationship between Israel and the United States enables them to act together at many different levels. At the very least, Israel is militarily supported by the United States, so they're very directly involved in this conflict. On the other hand, when it comes to Iran responding itself, I mean, whether it has the right to defend itself, I'm sorry. I mean, Israel is the one that attacked first. Now, they are saying that this was a preemptive strike because Iran has nuclear activities and they have a nuclear program. They want to enrich uranium. And ultimately, Iran and the United States and some of the European countries, they said that Iran wants to have a nuclear weapon. They're denying that. And there were diplomatic talks with the United States and with European countries. In fact, according to reports, there may be one tomorrow taking place between the European decision makers and the Iranian side on nuclear talks as well. So we'll see how that diplomatic channel will also have an impact on the conflict itself, whether it will maybe even lead to some sort of halt in these confrontations. But if we look at the region, all the countries that Israel is defending itself against are the countries attacked by Israel. We look at, I mean, the genocide taking place in Gaza. We look at all the other atrocities or violence in the occupied territories in Palestine. When we look at Syria, when we look at Lebanon, when we look at Iran, we see that it is specifically Israel that is targeting or initiating these attacks against the countries in the region. So Israel is actually, due to this expansionist policy, maximalist territory gains or this aggressive policies in the region, they have turned into a destabilizing factor for the region. They don't see diplomacy as a matter or as an instrument to overcome differences. They don't see any political negotiations as a tool to overcome differences. They see no legitimacy in international law, international human rights law. They have committed war crimes in Gaza, for example. So all these show one thing to us, that Israel attacks countries that it sees as a unit in the region that they have conflict with, and they attack them, and they say we have the right to defend ourselves. I mean, it is one thing to criticize Iran nuclear program and try to find a diplomatic solution to there. It is another thing to have either through diplomacy or through military even to minimize Iran's proxy elements in the region. But it's another thing to try to change the regime by or say that we want to eliminate the nuclear threat from Iran by directly attacking the country without any room for negotiations. I think, of course, every country has the right to defend themselves when they are being attacked by another country. When we look at Ukraine and Russia, the Ukrainian side has right to defend itself against Russia. If Russia was attacked by the Ukrainians and they were the ones who initiated the war, we would say that Russia has the right to defend itself because these countries are sovereign states and they shouldn't be attacked by another country when there is a room for diplomacy still on the table. But I think Israel disregards all that. Israel disregards diplomacy, disregards negotiation, disregards any room for peace. I mean, we see the actions not just in Iran. I mean, look at the occupied territories in Palestine. Look at Israel's attack on southern Lebanon or southern Syria. I mean, where do we place? Does Syria has nuclear weapons? Does Lebanon have nuclear weapons? Of course, Israel can have the argument that, there is Hezbollah in Lebanon, for example. Sure, that is true, but you're also attacking them at the same time. This is not to legitimize any country that have different proxies in the region and use them as a destabilizer or to spread their influence through illegitimate groups. I mean, when that is the case, I think it becomes more than one destabilizing factor. Of course, now we are talking at the heat of the moment. There is a very harsh and hard conflict between Iran and Israel is aggressively attacking Iran. Okay, we are saying that Iran has the right to defend itself, but at the same time, I think it should be noted that Iran had the responsibility to minimize the destabilizing effect of its proxies in the region. I mean, we saw what happened in Syria. We saw what happened in Lebanon or other places or through its proxies. I think the fact, or Yemen, for example. But all these aside, these preemptive strikes by Israel, supported by the United States, I think, leave no room for peace. But at the same time, I think it shows that the Western countries have not learned their lesson from Iraq, Afghanistan, and places like Libya, for example. When you forcefully try to export a regime change, that doesn't turn out very good. I mean, Iraq's still recovering after nearly 2 decades. Libya is still unstable. We will see what happens in Iran, but I think Iran is not an easy matter to overcome. If there is a ceasefire, that's a different story, but to achieve an actual peace, that is not something that I foresee happening, as long as there is Israel on one side as this aggressive and expansionist policy that wants to gain more territory by force and by just literally bombing everything, and on the other side, when there is an Islamic regime or a regime as it is in Iran today.
Mehmet, we were talking about ceasefires, right? We're now expecting that, when can we see a ceasefire? But in the last few days, the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he said that for us, our lives are not valuable. For us, the religion of Islam is valuable. So when the Supreme Leader is making such statements, do you think that Iran is ready for a ceasefire? Because now it just wants to attack Israel because of everything that it has done over the last few years against not just Iran, but also in other countries, like you mentioned, in Syria, in Lebanon, in the occupied Gaza Strip. So do you think that Iran is actually ready or looking for a ceasefire? Because right now, Iran wants to attack Israel, and it's doing so because of whatever has happened in the past few years.
Well, I think Iran's attacking Israel because Israel attacked first. So I think that should be mentioned in the first place. But of course, there is the religious, theological rhetoric coming from Ali Khamenei as the supreme leader of Iran. That religious rhetoric is to reconcile its obviously follower base. But nevertheless, I think that religious rhetoric is something else. The conflict between Iran and Israel is due to geopolitical rivalry and Israel's expansionist policies in the region. And they also have a theological interpretation and motivation that has led them to occupy Palestine, that has led them to having that aim of occupying Syria, Iran, perhaps other parts in the region, including Türkiye. That interpretation, that perverse interpretation on the Israeli side is also there. So yes, we can say that this is a theological rivalry or a theological war, a theopolitical war. But at the same time, we should not forget that it is not solely that. It is I think they pose each other existential threats. I mean, this is how they see. Israel sees Iran's presence with this regime as an existential threat for itself, and the same thing goes for Iran. So until that is cleared, I think it will be difficult to. We can say that a ceasefire could be established, and through diplomacy now, but to have an actual peace or to have to eliminate this conflict, it's not possible when the two sides have very firm, non-compromising, and very ideological motivations or theological motivations in their positions.
Mehmet, thanks for that analysis, for letting us know as well what the reality is on the ground and how both of these sides are approaching the conflict. Obviously, Israel attacked first, but Iran has a right to respond. And like you said, Iran is doing so because of whatever we've seen in the past few years against the Israeli expansion, how Israel wants to expand its footprint across the Middle East region. Thank you so much for that analysis, Mehmet. Now let's take a look at this news report about what Israel is doing in Gaza, and we'll be right back.
Israeli gunfire and strikes have killed at least 140 people across Gaza in the past 24 hours, according to local health officials. At least 40 of those killed over the past day died as a result of Israeli gunfire and airstrikes on Wednesday, Gaza's health ministry said. The deaths include the latest in near-daily killings of Palestinians seeking aid in the 3 weeks since Israel partially lifted a total blockade on the territory. Medics said separate airstrikes on homes in Gaza City killed more than 20 people, while 5 others were killed in an airstrike on an encampment in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. At Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, Fida Masood says her son was injured while getting aid. She said Palestinians have been suffering for 2 years and that eyes have been drawn away from their plight as attention has shifted to the air war between Israel and Iran. On Tuesday, Gaza's health ministry said nearly 400 Palestinians had been killed and more than 3,000 wounded since aid deliveries restarted in late May. Israel is now channeling much of the aid into Gaza through a new U.S. and Israeli-backed group, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Israel's subsequent military assault has killed nearly 55,600 Palestinians, according to Gaza's health ministry.
Welcome back to the program. Now let's take a look at the front page of Daily Sabah. Mehmet, yesterday the Turkish president, he made some important statements. He talked about how Israel has been attacking Iran. He spoke about how the defense industry needs to be improved and Turkey needs to be extremely self-sufficient when it comes to, military equipment. But what catches my attention here is Israel owns nuclear weapons and has ignored all international rules in the development of nuclear weapons. How are you looking at the Turkish response, Mehmet?
Well, first of all, Mr. Erdogan had a very delivered a very historic speech yesterday at the parliament in his party's group meeting. What he said yesterday is actually there are several things. One is that Israel's aggression needs to be noticed and it will be recorded in the history, and those who have a responsibility will be held accountable. The other thing that he said was Iran's responsibility. Iran's right to defend itself. The third, he's underlined he said this very clearly, that Turkey is ready for all negative possible scenarios, be it, migrant movements or be it other harsher impacts of this conflict that could trickle over to Turkey. Turkey is ready as a strong state, he said, as a state with very deep historical roots, will be ready for any negative impacts of this conflict. And I think one of the important impacts of his speech, one of the important points from his speech was that he underlined that, okay, Israel is aggressive, Iran is defending itself, but at the same time, all the regional actors have responsibility to recalculate or rethink about how they have been acting throughout the years, how they need to reevaluate their positions, be it on their position on Gaza, be it on their position on Syria, and how these instabilities affecting everyone in the region, or their position on Israel. And one of the other important impacts, the points he said from his speech is about, of course, Turkey's growing defense industry and defense capabilities, and that military muscle, how it has grown for the past 2 decades. I think this muscle, the military muscle, combined with the economic leadership or political leadership that the country has been displaying in its region, I think shows that Turkey has this deterrence factor that is now enabling itself to have this autonomy in its foreign policy and leadership in the region, and that is a deterrence for any threats that could come even from this conflict itself. So, when it comes to Israel and Iran having nuclear weapons, okay, we say that Iran is developing its nuclear weapons, but Israel has not denied that it doesn't have any nuclear weapons. It's in fact it's not a signatory for the non-proliferation treaty. So, nobody's questioning Israel's nuclear capabilities. Israel is not transparent when it comes to nuclear capabilities. Iran is not a signatory. I mean, Israel is not a signatory to this treaty, international treaty. So when there is that double standards when it comes to nuclear capacity, nuclear capabilities, or the possibility of having a nuclear weapon, I think everybody notices that there is a hypocrisy that favors Israel over Iran. I mean, it's not okay to have nuclear for Iran, and I think that should be the case because that nuclear proliferation doesn't serve anybody's interest right now, or to get into this race of having nuclear weapons. But at the same time, we should question why Israel is not denying that they don't have, or are they transparent about this nuclear, owning a nuclear weapon or not? I mean, many claims that they have warheads, and they're not denying that.
Mehmet, one more question, if I may. Erdogan said, unfortunately, international institutions, particularly the United Nations and states, are silent in the face of the aggression unfolding before their eyes. He has said on multiple occasions the world is bigger than five. And you know what's surprising is that Israel has cases ongoing at the ICC over genocide, and still it gets this Western support. How are you looking at, what's happening right now between Israel and Iran, and how the United Nations and other international institutions, for example, the IAEA, how are you looking at their response?
Well, I mean, we know that there's a transition in the global governance, and the international institutions are not ready to provide solutions to the new crisis around the world. Now there's Iran, but there's other crises that are happening at the same time around the world. I think international organizations, international institutions are failing to respond to new crises of the new world. So there is this need for reform to the global governance, which Mr. Erdogan has when he says the world is bigger than five, or when he says a fair world is possible, he points to this need for a reform to international institutions where the international crises or the decision on how to find a solution shouldn't be left to only permanent five, the five member of the United Nations Security Council. Now, when the world is governed by a system that serves the interest of the powerful, it fails to bring just solutions when the needs of the weak, or when the rights of the weak needs to be protected. I mean, when we look at Palestine, hundreds of resolutions have passed against Israel, but nobody is able to actually employ them, or against Israel, or even when it comes to delivering humanitarian aid, it can face a veto at the Security Council. I mean, this is a system that only serves the interests of the powerful, and unfortunately, the world is bigger than those five. There's nearly 200 countries around the world. There's not one Muslim nation represented in the United Nations Security Council. There's not an African nation. I mean, the huge African continent does not have one member, one state representing this huge continent with many different needs and problems in the Security Council. I mean, how is this a just system when there is a system in place that served or that actually was able to find solutions to that bipolar world of Cold War era? Now there's a multipolar world. World has more than one strong player, and that needs to be changed.
Indeed. Mehmet, thanks for that analysis. We'll continue to monitor all the latest developments from Daily Sabah as well.
Thank you.
Now let's take a look at this news report, and we'll be right back.
Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, rejected US President Donald Trump's demand for unconditional surrender on Wednesday. It came as thousands fled intensified Israeli airstrikes in the Iranian capital, Tehran, prompting Turkey to tighten security at the border it shares with Iran. In a recorded television speech, Khamenei said Americans, quote, should know that any US military intervention will undoubtedly be accompanied by irreparable damage.
Iran's got a lot of trouble.
Trump has veered from proposing a swift diplomatic end to the war to suggesting the United States might join it. In social media posts on Tuesday, he mused about killing Khamenei and demanded Iran's unconditional surrender. A source familiar with internal discussions said Trump and his team were considering joining Israel in strikes against Iranian nuclear sites, among other options. Israel's military told Iranians to leave parts of the capital for their safety while it struck targets. It said 50 Israeli jets had struck around 20 targets in Tehran overnight, including sites producing raw materials, components, and manufacturing systems for missiles. The prospect that Trump could bring the United States into the war has raised the stakes since he abandoned a G7 summit and met his security officials in Washington on Tuesday. Iran's ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva, Ali Bahraini, told a news conference he already saw the US as complicit in what Israel is doing.
If we come to the conclusion that the United States is directly involved in attacks against Iran, we will start responding to the United States.
Iran has been exploring options for leverage, including veiled threats to restrict access to the Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most important shipping artery for oil. Tehran has in the past threatened to close the strait, but has never followed through. While inside Iran, the biggest attacks since the war with Iraq in the 1980s have wiped out an echelon of senior leadership. Authorities have allowed fewer images of destruction to circulate than in the early days of the bombing, and a ban on filming by the public has been imposed. In Israel, sirens rang out warning people of Iranian retaliatory missile strikes. At Ramat Gan city train station east of Tel Aviv, people were lying on city-supplied mattresses lined along the floor. Among them, Tamar Vaiz, prepared for her second night in the makeshift shelter, alongside her two children.
I feel scared and overwhelmed, especially because I live in the densely populated area that Iran is seeming to target. And our city has very, very old buildings without shelters and without safe spaces.
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now from Manchester is strategic affairs expert Dr. Hamid Khan Al-Mashriqi. Dr. Hamid, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Dr. Hamid, let's start with the Iranian government. Iran's parliament is reportedly preparing a bill to withdraw from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. How significant could that move be, Hamid?
Yes, Umar, that is very significant move from Iran government. And actually, if we look at the NPT, I mean, Iran is the one who has signed it, while on the other hand, Israel has never signed on non-proliferation territory treaty because it stops or it prevents the world for the countries not to be able to be nuclear power or to increase their nuclear capability. Once, if what Iran is saying that they are planning to come out of it, it means they will have no binding not to prepare themselves as a nuclear power. And it is very, on the one hand, it is very dangerous, but on the other hand, if you look at the current aggression by Israel, I mean, they justify that they've been abiding all the IAEA restrictions on them, and they were only working on nuclear energy, and they have still suffered so many sanctions for the last many years, despite of abiding and despite of following all the instructions by IAEA and other organizations. So they believe that if it did not make any change for them to be able to have peace or to be able to have a better progress in the country, so why not they come out of it and they openly start increasing their strength. And to have, we would say that they would work on some kind of nuclear liberty in their hands. But I believe that it does not mean that Iran will be able to have a nuclear capability immediately. It is just a significant symbolic move from Iran that this is the reaction of aggression by Israel, rather than considering it as a step towards making a nuclear bomb straight away. It is not going to be happen like that.
Dr. Hamid, tell me about how the United States has been repositioning its military assets, because in the past few days we saw the USS Nimitz and USS Carl Vinson, the two warships, they were repositioned in the Middle East. And then in the last few hours, we also saw how Donald Trump said, I haven't made a decision yet, but I could do so in the coming few hours. So how are you analyzing his statement? What do you think the president has to say on this conflict? And do you think his decisions would be, impacting how Israel attacks Iran in the next few days?
Yes, definitely. It is a very critical situation. And I would say the region is in a very volatile situation at the moment. And particularly from Donald Trump, President USA, his statements are, on the one hand, he's trying to act as in English we call it bully, that he wants to get everything done with his threatening to Iran. Like he said, to surrender to Iran, then he tweeted that they can target Khamenei wherever he is, but he does not want to kill him. So these kinds of statements are not helping the peace in the region. Rather, on the other hand, the way the USA is increasing their military, I would say, existence and establishment in the region, it is very dangerous, because one thing is very clear, that at the moment, Iran have Israel or their enemy target 1,500 kilometers away from Iran's border between Tel Aviv and Iran. But if America comes into this conflict, and if this war turns directly into America-Iran conflict, then it means that Iran would be able to target so many, American assets within the region, which are very closer to Iran, which are in the Persian Gulf, which are in Iraq, and there are so many other American assets like air bases and other things, which will be easy target for Iran, but it will expand the conflict. It will escalate the war. It will be very catastrophic. And that is the thing which Donald Trump has to consider before joining this war in favor of Israel. One thing is very clear, that the capability of Israel is still limited in terms of destroying nuclear sites of Iran, and that's why Netanyahu is trying his best to drag America into this war. And once the America is into this war, then there will be very high risk of very large consequences and catastrophic consequences of this war, because then on the one hand, Iran will retaliate further, then there will be Chinese and Russian intervention or support for Iran, and that will change the whole scenario of the region and of the war. So, I mean, it is a very high risk from Americans. They must have a calculation, and it could be very dangerous if America involves in it. So their sense must prevail at this time.
Dr. Hamid Khan al-Mashriqi, thank you so much for joining us today on the program. It was a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Mehmet Çelik, thank you for your analysis, both on Daily Sabah and here in the studio, and telling us what the reality is behind this conflict. And now 7 days have passed as well. So let's see what happens in the next few days. Thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.